But in most of the world, what we are witnessing from Trump is continuity and escalation or intensification of the longstanding post World War II policies of the US government, which are imperial in nature. But with respect to Europe and especially Western Europe, we're witnessing something different where the Trump administration it has to be said, they've meddled in EU politics in support of a populist right wing faction, with which they have political affinity in Germany. J.D. Vance's speech was a signal moment at the Munich Security Conference, and they've decided to target the firewall in the politics of the most powerful, economically wealthy country in the EU, in the heart of the EU, the firewall, which has kept out very popular parties like the AfD. J.D. Vance also made passing reference to left-wing populists, referring to Sarah Wagenknecht, who is seen as beyond the pale by the transatlanticist liberals. And the Munich Security Conference expected him to address Ukraine, to present a path forward, and instead he attacked them at the heart of their their managed democracy. But there is a deeper meaning there, which is that there is an affinity culturally between many of the forces around Trump. J.D. Vance, for example, converted to, I think, pre-Vatican II Catholicism just a few years ago and has gone through a kind of personal political transformation.
School, and I think it's a very Christian concept, by the way, that you love your family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens in your own country, and then after that, you can focus and prioritize the rest of the world. A lot of the far left has completely inverted that. They seem to hate the citizens of their own country and care more about people outside their own borders. That is no way to run a society. And I think the profound difference that Donald Trump brings to the leadership of this country is the simple concept, America first. It doesn't mean you hate anybody else. It means that you have leadership. And President Trump has been very clear about this, that puts the interests of American citizens first.
St. Augustine, in his classic work, City of God, offers the term Ordo Amoris, often rendered as rightly ordered love, as a definition for the concept of virtue. Let us take a look at this section from St. Augustine's City of God, Book 15, Chapter 22. And thus beauty, which is indeed God's handiwork, but only a temporal, carnal, and lower kind of good, is not fitly loved in preference to God, the eternal, spiritual, and unchangeable good. For though it be good, it may be loved with an evil as well as with a good love. It is loved rightly when it is loved ordinately, evilly when inordinately. But if the Creator is truly loved, that is, if he himself is loved and not another thing in his stead, he cannot be evilly loved. For love itself is to be ordinately loved, because we do well to love that which, when we love it, makes us live well and virtuously. So that it seems to me that it is a brief but true definition of virtue to say, it is the order of love. I would further refer interested listeners to St. Augustine's teaching on the tranquility of order. Augustine, a highly influential early bishop and theologian, expanded on the concept of the order of love in his work on Christian doctrine. That's in Book 1, chapters 27 and 28. Now he is a man of just and holy life, who forms an unprejudiced estimate of things, and keeps his affections also under strict control, so that he neither loves what he ought not to love, nor fails to love what he ought to love, nor loves that more which ought to be loved less, nor loves that equally which ought to be loved either less or more, nor loves that less or more which ought to be loved equally. Augustine wrote in On Christian Doctrine. St. Thomas Aquinas, a 13th century doctor of the Church, in his Summa Theologica, and that would be in the second part of the second part, question 31, particularly articles 2 and 3. cited and expanded on St. Augustine's work, writing that there must be some order in things loved out of charity, in reference to the first principle of that love, which is God. Aquinas defined this order of charity, or Ordo Caritatis, as a principle that dictates how we should love God, ourselves, and our neighbors in a hierarchical and interconnected manner. He cited Augustine to argue that while one should love all people equally, one ought to chiefly consider those who are more closely united by reason of place, time, or other circumstances. In Aquinas' analysis, he concludes that God is to be loved first and foremost, followed by oneself, then neighbors, and among neighbors, he wrote that there are those who should be loved with a more intense affection, such as family. The hierarchy laid out by Aquinas is not meant to diminish the importance of loving all people as Christ commanded, but does acknowledge that certain relationships, practically speaking, carry more immediate obligations. For example, a married person has a higher obligation to care for his or her spouse than for others, and an obligation to provide for his or her own children before providing for those in other places. For further study of actual Catholic political philosophy, and when I say actual, I'm not referring to anything produced since the Judas Council of Vatican II. I'm talking about actual Catholic political philosophy, not anything connected with any of the false popes connected to Vatican II. I recommend this work, The Framework of a Christian State, a preconciliar work, along with certain encyclicals of Pope Leo XIII, such as Immortale Dei and Libertas Prestantissimum, and supplementing these with this collection of Leo XIII's writings, and finally, this indispensable book, The Popes Against Modern Errors, which currently is on sale for $5 at 10 bucks. Get it. Get all of these now, without delay. It's time to get serious. It's time to move beyond the surface, beyond the headlines of the fake stream media and their prostitutes. If one wants to get really real, wants to get really deep into actual Catholic political philosophy, which is the truest and most profound of any political philosophy, one must move beyond the headlines, beyond Twitter, beyond X, beyond YouTube. Get off of here. I don't care if you subscribe. I don't care if you like. I want you to get real. Really real. Get to it. Dig into these materials.